They kind of just looked at me like, okay, this guy's done. I mean, there's nothing to his head. You can read people's faces coming to visit you and see the horror on their face.
Mike Wolo from Massachusetts is lucky to be alive after a horrible accident.
So my friend David calls me. He owns a granite importing shop. The granite that they import are sheets of stone that they use for kitchen countertops. These sheets show up in bundles of 7 or 8. Each bundle weighs about 10,000 pounds. Asked me, hey, can I help out unloading a shipment of granite? I said no. I've helped him multiple times over the course of a couple of years, and I really didn't enjoy doing it. I found it to be dangerous.
But his friend insisted.
He called me at least another, 2 or 3 times. And finally, his father ended up calling me, so I didn't want to disappoint him. So I agreed to help him out.
When he arrived, Mike felt things were off.
It was a different crane operator than we've used in the past. He set up in a different location than we normally would set up. It looked like the cargo tanner was just pulled out of the ocean. It was all rusted up and dented and kind of surprised us. We're removing the stone one bundle at a time. The floor we noticed was buckling and moving up and down, and the tractor trailer was kind of shifting around. And it just didn't feel safe. And we kept on yelling over to David, this doesn't feel right. And basically he's like, stop whining, let's just get it done. We can't ship it back at this point. We're down to our last 2 bundles. Next thing you know what, I just hear David screaming at the top of his lungs. And I don't understand why he's screaming. I just figured, okay, he's just yelling at us not going fast enough or something. It just surprised me. Next thing you know, Tony comes running over to me. So I start running, and at that point I look up and I see a wall of stone falling off. At that point, it was way too late, and it came down and hit my left temple and crushed my face and head against the other bundle of stone on the other side of the container. The impact was so immense, they said the whole tractor trailer went up on its side and then flipped back down, and it literally almost rolled over the tractor trailer. And the noise must have been incredible.
The guys on site worked to free Mike.
They said they could see inside my skull. Everybody's just screaming and crying and assume I'm dead. And then David just snapped out of it and realized, I think we have 6 minutes to get him breathing before he has permanent brain damage. The crushed stone has me pinned. Tony jumped in under it now, the dangerous stone in the air, pulled me out, and I'm not breathing. So they realized, okay, well, it's not like they can give me mouth to mouth. I have no mouth. So they all decide to kind of hold my body and flip me upside down to empty out all the blood that is blocking my airways. And at that point, they said I started kicking. All 3 of them taking turns holding my head back together because everything's just wide open. They said blood was just pouring out.
First responders finally arrived.
They kind of just looked at me like, okay, this guy's done. I mean, there's nothing to his head. They throw me on a gurney, get me into the back of an ambulance, and they opened up 2 units of blood, and they said it was just going into me and right out. So they knew my organs at that point were starting to shut down. They get me over to the helicopter and take off with me.
Mike woke up from a coma that night.
That's when I felt the pain. Even though I know, now that I was on a morphine drip and whatnot, my whole body was swelled up. My hands, my feet, everything. My head was the size of a beach ball. I had broken my neck, fractured my C1, my C2, and my shoulders. My face was crushed and ripped off down to 2 7/8 of an inch wide. My jaw had ripped off and broken into 3. My palate ripped off the skull, broke that in 2. Both cheekbones were destroyed. My left eye blew out and was down below where my chin would have been located.
Mike doesn't have photos showing him at his worst.
But seeing the CT scans of how far out my face swelled beyond the neck brace, it had to be horrific for everybody to come and see me at the hospital. You can read people's faces coming to visit you and see the horror on their face. My eyes were so swollen because they were so swelled up because they had to push the eye back in, both eyes, I think.
Doctors advised loved ones to say goodbyes.
I think my oldest brother, John, had asked, well, what's the chance of him living? And they gave me a 2%. Like, we give him 2%, and maybe at this time you guys should go into his room and say what you need to say, and perhaps time to say goodbyes. I just remember grabbing the tubes and the wires, and I'm kind of bringing them up so I can look at them, because I could just feel them. Like, this doesn't feel normal, but I can't talk because once again, I have no mouth. My oldest brother, John, he begins to whisper in my ear, and he starts explaining to me that, Mike, you were in a bad accident. So of course I'm just squeezing his hand as hard as I could. So he squeezed my hand. He's squeezing it really hard. Door kicks open and the floodgates open. 14 people ran in there. I just remember my brothers are all high-fiving each other, and my parents, sit down next to me and hold my hand. Even though I was very foggy, not quite understanding between the morphine and just pure exhaustion and pure pain, taking it all in, because my family also hid it from me of how serious the accident was. They downplayed it.
The uphill road to recovery began.
The swelling went down in less than a week. They did put me in a induced coma for a couple of days because, I kept on trying to leave the bed. I just wanted out. You can't eat. You can't really breathe well. You have a trach tube. You have pain. You have sensory overload.
Mike's family prevented him from seeing his face.
They didn't want me getting up and going to the bathroom, which I thought was very odd. But no mirrors. Don't let him see himself. But when I was getting visitors, you can see their facial reactions, like, holy, what am I looking at? You're reading their faces and you just know they have a look of surprise and horror. They sent in a nurse one morning to give me a shave. At the end of him giving me a shave, he's like, well, you look great again. And he grabbed a mirror and he faced towards me. But I was kind of not all there because of the morphine. And I'm looking and going, I don't know who am I looking at? I walked into the bathroom and looked into the mirror. And that was the worst moment of my life. That I looked like Sloth from the movie Goonies back in the early mid-'80s. My head was gigantic. The top of my head was kind of pointed and misshapen. My left side was a lot larger than my right side. My left eye was moving around on its own, not looking anywhere I was trying to look. My right eye, all the blood vessels blew out of it, so it looked like a demon's eye. And my cheeks and my lips were all deformed, and all I just remember is the horror of, like, okay, well, life's over. What woman would want to be near me? What children would ever, want to go near me? Like, I guess the thoughts of, okay, someday I'll get married and have a family of my own were out the door. And that was the hardest moment of my life. I went to go sit back in bed, but I decided to sit in a chair and just look out the window and staring out at Boston. Boston nighttime is very pretty. And I just stared out the window and I started to cry. And then I realized I had my mom starting to cry, and that I broke her. I had her crying and I felt terrible and guilty. So I stood up and said, okay, nope, none of that. Grabbed that machine and I started walking that day. I was compelled, if I can get well enough to get out of the hospital, I will survive.
That was the motivation Mike needed.
At the 2-week mark, they said, you know what, you're clear to go. We're going to release you to the rehab hospital. And, made it my goal to, like, okay, let's keep hitting these milestones.
Doctors told family they were unsure if he'd get back to normal.
They're talking to the doctors. Will Mike be able to do anything he used to do? Riding ATVs, motorcycles, bike riding, skiing, hiking, camping, you name it. I enjoyed doing everything outdoors. And I just remember hearing the doctor say, no, his life's not going to be the same. He's not going to be able to do that stuff. And how ticked off I was hearing that. And I was determined at that point, like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to prove everybody wrong.
And he did.
My accident happened end of October, and I was snowmobiling by the first week of January. Talk about an unbelievable feeling of being free again, feeling you just belong, sightseeing and being out in nature and just enjoying the outdoors and, breathing some fresh air. So just unbelievable.
His recovery took months.
I have an all metal face. I got 110 screws and 20 titanium plates holding my face together. My head was swelled for months. I think the swelling didn't really technically go fully all the way down until maybe 8 or 9 months later. And that was hard because you go out in public and you'd have all eyes on you. I kind of regressed and developed, some anxiety and agoraphobia. I was afraid to kind of leave my my home and my comfort area and my safety zone. And so I would say just over a year, I started looking really good. I believe a lot in mind over matter. I believe that's what helped me just deal with the pain, agoraphobia, anxiety, and depression.
To get back in shape, he began training with the local football team.
I'm 40 years old. These guys are, all the kids are, could be my kids. I could be their dads.
He even filled in during a game.
After the game, I broke down. After the game, went across the field to the end zone and just broke down crying, realized where I was in life, that I just played a semi-pro football game with these giants. And after all I've been through, never thought I'd actually get a dream fulfilled.
Despite having thoughts in his hospital room that he wouldn't find love, he did with Rebecca, a childhood friend.
About a year and a half later, we were married, and now we have 2 little boys, Michael and Evan. Life is really good. Never, ever would have imagined being married to a beautiful, smart, sweet woman and having 2 incredible, sweet boys. Very, very fortunate. So I guess good things do come to those who wait.
Mike still has long-term symptoms.
Yeah, I get some jaw pain, a lot of sinus issues because my sinuses were all destroyed. I get ear infections a lot. It's just part of the price you pay to survive such a crazy accident.
But he's grateful for the life he has and wants to motivate others dealing with trauma.
People want to hear a nice story once in a while. And whether somebody was in a car accident or a workplace accident or, motorcycle accident, you got to find happiness somehow. And my story, I think, gave a lot of people hope. All these people thanking me for sharing the story because, my story should be a story of trauma and tragedy with a very nice storybook ending, so to speak, and that there is life after a trauma.
For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Andrea Swindall.